But if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the rule, and this they will do.
Everything out of the ordinary is to be reported.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
That's an interesting picture. It was a church. Do you know that word? Yes, there were still churches when I was a child.
You know, there was a time in human history when God and the hand of science were the same.
MK Ultra mind control rules in Hollywood. If you don't know, Google that and look into it.
Some of the names of criminals is hardly informing.
Criminals and salad of patriots.
Patriots, like patriots!
You're listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina.
All aboard! I've just smashed a bottle of sparkling grape juice across the bow of the SS Extraordinary. We're now embarking on our maiden voyage into the Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina show. Toot toot! Hello, my lovelies. I am the aforementioned Natalina, and you're listening to the premiere episode of Beyond Extraordinary, tentatively titled Episode 1. So it begins. Many of you have been waiting for months for this show to finally begin, and for those of you who've been with Extraordinary Intelligence since the beginning, you've likely been waiting for years. I'm nothing if not suspenseful, even if it is completely unintentional, and I'm super excited to get rolling, so here we go. For those of you who are newish to my site or my mission, let me just give you the really quick version. I began the website, extraordinaryintelligence.com, in 2009. It started as a means for me to explore and discuss all things unexplained and unknown and paranormal and creepy and weird, and to attract like-minded seekers to join the discussion. I was on a bit of a spiritual quest. The idea was to combine paranormal and conspiracy topics with lighthearted fun, and the site became rather successful relatively quickly. Then, during a particularly difficult period in my life, I had a transformative experience, and it resulted in me becoming a born-again believer in Jesus Christ. From that point on, I shifted the focus of EI to a biblical worldview. I continue to discuss supernatural matters, conspiracy theories, and the like, but I no longer celebrate or encourage New Age or occult topics. In fact, I spend a great deal of time exposing the dangers of the New Age. So in this weekly radio show, I'll be doing much of the same thing. I plan to do a bit of ranting, and we'll explore current events, and of course we'll have some fun because I gotta. I'll also be inviting some exciting guests to the show, and in the coming weeks you're going to love the lineup I have in store. I'll be finalizing the schedule this week, and then I'll post it all on extraordinaryintelligence.com. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to visit the website and subscribe via email or feed reader. You can do so by going to the site. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a link that says subscribe, an image that says subscribe, and there's a place where you can put your email address in, or you can subscribe via reader if you do that. If you do subscribe via email, make sure you're going to get an initial email that'll ask you to confirm your subscription, so be watching to see if it goes into your spam filter or something. Your subscription is not confirmed until you click that link, because they like to make things nice and difficult. And then once you're subscribed, you'll be notified every time I post something new, when I post upcoming schedule for the shows and who's going to be on. My plan is kind of to do a combination of things. Anyone who knows me or has spoken to me, or really anyone who's read any of my long-winded articles, knows that I have never been at a shortage for words. I have a lot on my mind 98% of the time, and I thought that doing a show would be so much fun because in some ways it's difficult to really put into an article sort of a stream of consciousness. Here's how I'm feeling, here's my opinion, here's what I'm thinking about on, a variety of topics. The primary outlet I've had really is to do discussions on Facebook and this type of thing, but it's just not quite the same. Sometimes you just want to sit and spill it. So I will be doing some shows that are just me talking about whatever happens to be on my mind. Maybe just going through some of the latest news and headlines and giving my opinion about some of that and analysis. And then I'm going to have some really, really great guests, as I said, coming up. And we'll do some shows that are just straight interviews, where I just kind of let people who are a lot smarter than me talk about things that are a lot more interesting than me and what I have to say. And we'll have a lot of those kinds of shows. And depending upon the response to this podcast, I would like to take the show live in the future, but of course there are expenses involved in that, so I didn't want to just jump right into that until I knew for sure that it was something that would fit with not only my audience but with my format. And since I'm brand spanking new, I don't really know for sure what my format is yet, folks. And I'm just not ashamed to wing it sometimes. So you never know. You could hit gold or you could bomb completely. But either way, you're coming along on the ride with me. And I really I love podcasts and internet radio. It's an absolute passion of mine. I rarely enter my vehicle without my MP3 player fully loaded with the latest and greatest shows that the web has to offer. I never wash the dishes without having my headphones in and listening to some podcast. Whatever it is that I may be doing, I generally speaking like to pass the time, whether I'm working out or whatever it is, listening to podcasts. And I have so many favorites. And I really just want to say thanks to the hosts who have taught me so much through this medium. Really, it is an exciting way to just learn from these well-informed folks and people like Derek and Sharon Gilbert of PID Radio and View from the Bunker, L.A. Marzulli of Acceleration Radio, there's Daniel Ott of The Edge Broadcast, Richard Grund and Joe Citrone of Reflections in the Dark. I love Basil and Gons of Canary Crime Radio. Just a whole bunch of people that I regularly download and listen to. And to all of you, I just have to say, you had a good run. It was fun while it lasted. I'm just kidding. No, I am humbled to even consider that maybe someday I consider myself a peer. Right now, I am just trying to carve my own little niche into this world, and we'll see what happens with it. But thank you so much for everyone who's listening. And hey, let's get going with the show, shall we? So let's jump right into some of the main headlines that we've been seeing for the past few weeks. There's been a lot going on, a lot of really big stuff. It's a big deal. Everything from the NSA to joining the fight in Syria. And I'm sorry, what's that? Oh my goodness, you're kidding me. Folks, we have some breaking news. Apparently it's coming through to us from multiple sources that Kim Kardashian and Kanye West have just welcomed a baby girl to the world, and we can all just breathe a sigh of relief. Okay, now we're just going to jump right back into our less interesting, albeit somewhat pertinent headlines. First, I really want to talk about the NSA wiretapping scandal that has been in the news for the past couple of weeks. really, this is not all that new. I mean, we've been hearing about programs like this since the Bush days, and in fact, what really kind of gets me is how many folks who supported the Bush administration had really very little to say about secret wiretapping programs, etc. At that time, but are really up in arms about it right now. It seems unfair, and it seems like very selective reasoning. I by no means apologize for the Obama administration, but certainly, my goodness, we have to have a little bit of intellectual honesty here in stating the fact that this has been going on for a very long time, and either you're 100% for privacy rights and First Amendment freedoms, or you're not. You can't just only be against it when it happens to be coming from the political party that you oppose. And I think there's this one gentleman who back in 2008 really said it best.
This administration also puts forward a false choice between the liberties we cherish and the security we provide. I will provide our intelligence and law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to track and take out the terrorists without undermining our Constitution and our freedom. That means no more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more national security letters to spy on citizens who are not suspected of a crime. No more tracking citizens who do nothing more than protest a misguided war. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient. That is not who we are. And it's not what is necessary to defeat the terrorists. The FISA court works. The separation of powers works. Our Constitution works. We will again set an example for the world that the law is not subject to the whims of stubborn rulers and that justice is not arbitrary. This administration acts like violating civil liberties is the way to enhance our security. It is not. There are no shortcuts to protecting America.
Clearly, that young man had a good grasp of what it is that we are up against and what it is that we should be fighting for. He sounds like someone who would really defend our personal liberties. He would really defend our right to privacy and protect our First Amendment freedoms. It amazes me that someone like him could not get elected to office knowing that how many people are concerned about these privacy issues and and that they're not willing to give up their privacy for security. What a bright young man. I would have voted for him. Unlike our current president, who had this to say.
The modest encroachments on privacy that are involved in getting phone numbers or duration without a name attached and not looking at content, that on net it was worth us doing. Now, some other folks may have a different assessment of that, but I think it's important to recognize that you can't have 100% security and also then have 100% privacy and zero inconvenience. We're going to have to make some choices as a society.
Now, obviously, I'm just having a little bit of fun here at the expense of our dear leader. That first clip was actually him, not from 2008, but 2007, when he was in his campaigning mode, and he was tickling the eardrums of all of those who were tired of the obvious infringements on individual liberties that the Bush administration was carrying out. I was one of them. I was tired of it. I was weary of the illegal wiretapping and all of the things that came along with the USA Patriot Act and the pulling apart of some of the most fundamental freedoms that we have enjoyed since the Constitution came into being. I mean, the dismantling of habeas corpus and all of these things. I was so weary. I was actually somewhat enchanted by Barack Obama because he did present himself as a polar opposite of what we had been enduring pretty much since September 11th. and I wanted to see a change. I wanted to see something new and different, and I heard this man who talked about how he was going to defend the Constitution, and he was going to defend my personal freedoms that I was guaranteed by not only this piece of paper called the Constitution, as George W. Bush so eloquently put it, oh, it's just a piece of paper, but also these rights that are guaranteed to me by my Creator. I thought that Barack Obama very elegantly stated the problem and promised to be the solution to the problem. And perhaps it may make some of you out there think less of me, or talk amongst yourselves about how gullible I must have been. And I will admit to you freely that I was probably pretty gullible at the time. I had the classically defined Bush fatigue, and I wanted something different. And Barack Obama was different, and he was fresh, and he said all of the right things. And, I certainly have changed a lot in my political philosophy since that time. I am obviously a lot more conservative now than I used to be, although I would never consider myself to be a Republican. I think Republicans and Democrats are basically the same thing. I often liken them to two warring families that are both part of the mob. Both of them are criminal enterprises. They just have somewhat different ideas about how to carry out their criminal passions, but at the end of the day, they certainly do not have our best interests at heart. But I think that these two clips that I just played for you kind of show precisely how short the national memory is, because you still have these staunch liberals and Democrats who will stand at this administration's side and proclaim that they are the ones who are righteous and virtuous, when in reality, during the Bush administration, they were the ones screaming the most loudly about how our rights were being infringed upon. So I think what we have to admit is that as a people in general, we are very, very easily sold on the whole concept of the left-right paradigm. We would probably never like to admit it about ourselves, but we certainly will be a lot more forgiving to those who tend to speak to the things that are our personal banner issues, and we will sort of find ways to make excuses for the things that they do that in our hearts we know are wrong. We know it's wrong, but yet if somebody supports the things that we support, if they promise to uphold the things that that are important to us, we'll go to the ends of the earth to make excuses for the things that they are doing that are incredibly, incredibly deceitful and wrong. And I think that it's really important for us to all just take a really long, hard look inward, because we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. When I was a supporter of Barack Obama, for example, it was previous to my being saved, but even then I was very much against abortion. Probably not as militantly as I am now, but I was still pro-life at the time, and yet I supported Barack Obama, and I made excuses. I would say, well, he may personally not be anti-abortion, but at the same time, Roe versus Wade will never be overturned, and this is more a matter for the states anyway, so it really doesn't matter what his personal view on the matter is. What's really important right now is that we safeguard our liberties and freedoms. And of course, ironically, not only did my opinion on abortion prove to be completely wrong, and we're actually seeing an increase in the atrocities that are being carried out by these madmen who are performing late-term abortions and these houses of horror that is the abortion clinic. Not only are we seeing that continuing and increasing, but we're also finding that even the things that I thought would be protected by this administration were, I grossly missed the mark on that, and we're finding that he is not only continuing the dismantling of the Constitution that George W. Bush started, but he's actually taking it further, and he's really rather unapologetic about it, isn't he? It's quite disturbing. And there's a lot of people out there who kind of have the opinion that, well, why should any of us care? Because if you don't have anything to hide, then it doesn't really matter if they're listening in or they're recording or they're looking at your records or whatever. If you've got nothing to hide, then why are you so worried about it? And Reason Magazine did a really great article about this, and it was titled 3 Reasons the Nothing to Hide crowd Should Be Worried About Government Surveillance. And the author of this article, Scott Shackford, his name is, he points out that there's a number of reasons why, even if you feel you have nothing to hide, you should be concerned about this spying. Because, first, number one, he says every American is probably a criminal. And that's true. You may think your record is pristine, but if you have ever copied a song to your laptop, if you've ever taken a CD and just downloaded it to your computer so that you could put it on your MP3 player, you violated the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. You are a criminal. He goes on to point out a number of other ways that this program could affect people who think they have nothing to hide, and it's a really, really interesting article that I recommend, and I'll put it in the show notes for you to have a look at. But what I do find particularly interesting is that while the majority of folks that I've spoken to on all sides of the aisle are pretty concerned about the concept that these government agencies could be listening in or tapping into your records or your phone conversations or your email or your Facebook. Some people are actually very, very supportive of this. It blows my mind, but let's listen to Miss Alabama, for example.
Judge number 2, Wendy Malik, your question please for Alabama.
Government tracking of phone records has been in the news lately. Is this an invasion of privacy or necessary to keep our country safe? Why or why not?
I think the society that we live in today, it's sad that if we go to the movies or to the airport or even to the mall that we have to worry about our safety. So I would rather someone track my telephone messages and feel safe wherever I go than feel like they're encroaching on my privacy.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there's that. And Miss Alabama notwithstanding, it does seem that the majority of Americans are becoming quite skeptical of the Obama administration. Today, as I record this, which it's Monday, the 17th of June, a new poll just came out by CNN that shows that Barack Obama's popularity ratings have dropped considerably. His approval ratings are at their lowest point that they've been in over a year and a half. And some of the minutia of the poll does indicate that it has largely to do with these scandals that have been coming out. It seems like repeatedly, rapid fire, one thing after the other, whether it was the Benghazi information that's come out about how the extreme mishandling of that situation, and add to that the IRS targeting of Tea Party members, and then add on to that this new revelations about the NSA and their targeting of our, quote, metadata. But what it does point out is that over half, 45, his approval rating is at 45%. And 6 in 10 people actually say that that they disapprove of how Obama is handling government surveillance of U.S. citizens. And that actually is a higher percentage than those who disapproved of George W. Bush on the exact same issue, which again goes to my point that, you know, I think that the crowd that was very much in support of George W. Bush, it was a louder crowd, it was a more passionate crowd than that which exists currently for Obama. And that couldn't have been said probably in 2008, where it was a fanatical crowd that was in support of Obama. But I think now, at this point in time, at this point in his presidency, there's not a really rabid fan base for Obama anymore. Even those people who claim to be supporters are still kind of wishy-washy about the way that he's handled a lot of issues. And I've seen a lot of that with some of my friends who are more liberal-leaning. They are at least to the point now where they're kind of like, this is getting harder to defend. But I don't think you could say that about the people who would have been considered George Bush's base. I think they were incredibly forgiving, and I don't mean to be picking on that sort of right-wing evangelical base that supported George Bush and his administration. I say all of this only to just point out that I want people to be a little bit more honest with themselves and with others when it comes to whether or not we are going to support a person who really speaks to those personal issues that we hold to be sacred, but will trample on the rights of everyone else. You know, certain things are sacred and should be considered sacred universally, and one of those things is the freedom of the individual to have the privacy in their own home and in their own communications and in their own movements, you know, and it certainly makes me think of that quote that's attributed to Sinclair Lewis, although I think it's come about now that he never actually said this exact thing, but it says, when fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in a flag and carrying a cross. And a lot of Christians really hate that quote, but I really like it, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that we can honestly find ourselves supporting anyone who claims to be a Christian, even though there's no evidence of that, their fruits do not bear that out, right? And I think we are so quick to hitch our wagon to anyone who gives the appearance of being on our side, so to speak. And I think that is to our detriment because, you know, the Bible does say that even the very elect would be deceived if it were possible. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because I've seen a lot of people become deceived, and I myself have been deceived on a number of occasions politically, and it's become somewhat of a passionate point that I feel the need to make, and not just to my Christian brothers and sisters, but to my liberal brothers and sisters, and to everybody who I encounter who has any interest whatsoever in politics. Because I think that, you know, it's a cliche that's been beaten into the ground over and over and over again about the left-right paradigm and how I'm not going to be a part of that. But we do. It is so easy to get sucked into it. I mean, some people who had been so adamant that they were neither Republican nor Democrat, they were conservative, and they would only vote their conscience and their hearts. It surprised me how many of those people all of a sudden became ginormous Mitt Romney supporters. How did that happen? I mean, I'm probably not gaining a whole lot of fans, but and I mean, I understand the argument that was made about how, you know, he was I don't even know how I'm getting into this subject. Maybe I should just drop it. I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is that we need to be a little smarter. We need to use a little more discernment when we are deciding who we are going to attach our name to, whether it's through casting a vote or, even just anytime we publicly say something about a political figure, we are in a certain way casting a vote, because we are influencing people whether we realize it or not. Even when you get on your Facebook and you say something like, I support Mitt Romney because, or, I think Mitt Romney isn't that bad because he, isn't as bad as Barack Obama. He's not a socialist. Okay, fine, but he still doesn't care about anyone who is, middle class or under. I mean, that's just a fact. He bore that fact out by himself, by his own words. So anyway, somehow I am talking about Mitt Romney, who did not win the presidency, but hopefully you're at least in a little way following my messy little thought train. Maybe what we all need right now, just to kind of cleanse our palate, is a slow jam. Yep, I think we need a slow jam.
So the next time you're up late and you're surfing your phone, let me reassure you, baby, that you're never alone. And if you don't think that this fine stuff is really ideal, text yourself about it. Let us know how you feel. Nokia, iPhone, Galaxy 3, Facebook, and your search history. Gmail, voicemail, I gotta have it. It's got an on-off switch, baby. I'll tap it.
So that was Remy, the artist Remy, and he does a lot of work with Reason magazine, and that was his little parody, a little bit of a slow jam love letter from the NSA. And finally, I just have one thing that I would like to share with someone very special out there, and I think it's going to speak volumes, and then we'll move on to another topic.
For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
And that was just a little clip from Ephesians for my friends who happen to be maybe listening at the NSA. I just wanted to keep you apprised of the situation. And now let's move on to the topic of the red line that's been crossed in Syria. Of course, I'm sure you've heard that the Obama administration has made it clear that with this supposedly new information about chemical weapons being used in Syria, that they have crossed this proverbial red line, and as such, we have no choice but to get involved and support the Syrian rebels in the region. And it actually baffles my mind how anyone could hear or see this and not see an utter repeating of history. First of all, the timing. Obviously, with Obama's approval ratings dropping dramatically over the NSA scandal and the IRS scandal and everything else that's happened up to this point, the timing of the Syria stuff coming out is obviously quite convenient. Let's talk about distraction, right? The other thing is, throughout history, there's a certain playbook that seems to be used. I mean, I'm sure that this playbook is so dog-eared and wrinkled, and it probably is covered in coffee stains for the frequency with which presidents and those in power use this exact same script over and over again. And I cannot understand how so many people do not see this. First of all, the Syrian rebels have been linked very strongly to Al-Qaeda. These are not good guys. These are not folks that we really need to be attaching our wagon to, right? In fact, these are our enemies, are they not? I mean, are these not the people that were supposedly being monitored by the NSA to try to thwart their terroristic tactics? And yet, when it comes to the fact that they are in rebellion against the Assad presidency in Syria, suddenly they are our allies, or that we will supply them with weapons or whatever it is that ultimately will come about that we're supposedly going to do for them. I don't understand it. And it reminds me, obviously, of the simple fact that just look at our history. We supplied weapons and support to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and we supported them against the Russian occupation of their country, and as a result, out of the Mujahideen came the Taliban, who ultimately we've pinned responsibility for September 11, 2001, and the horrifying atrocity that happened on that day. Similarly, we supported and gave aid to the Ba'ath Party in Iraq, and the Ba'ath Party eventually gave rise to Saddam Hussein and everything that he did. And so, of course, we go in and we, by our own actions, aid in the creation of the Taliban, which gave rise to Osama bin Laden, who we eventually had to take down. We gave aid and support to the Ba'ath Party, who gave rise to Saddam Hussein, who we ultimately had to go in and take down. What do you think? Let's put on our detective hats for a second. What do you think is going to happen when we give aid and support to the Syrian rebels, who will obviously give rise to a new and worse fascist regime linked to Al-Qaeda in Syria? What do you think will happen next? Certainly they will probably put in place some horrifying dictator who is going to be worse than Bashar al-Assad, and we will have no choice but to go in there with our military might and take him out in the defense of freedom in the region. And then, of course, we will probably just turn, well, we already have turned much of the Middle East against us as it stands, but, you know, it's the same thing over and over and over and over again, and how people don't see this blows my mind. There's not even an attempt to go about things in a different way. As I say, it's the same script over and over and over again. And these folks, these Syrian rebels, they're maniacs. In fact, RT.com, Russia Today, just released an article talking about how the mayor of London, a fellow named Boris Johnson, came out and said that, well, this exact quote is that arming the Syrian rebels would be, quote, pressing weapons into the hands of maniacs and Al-Qaeda thugs. And he's right. He's absolutely right. And yet, off we go to war. Here we go. It's absolute madness. Do you not see? It is madness. Do you recall the video that went viral in May of this man in Syria who ripped the heart out of a person he was fighting and ate this person's heart? As troubling as that is, and as mind-boggling as that is, that was one of the Syrian rebels who did that. That was actually a Syrian rebel leader. And this is who we're supporting. You see, there are no good guys in this fight, just as there are no good guys in so many of the fights that we join. I am appalled that so many people who refer to themselves as conservatives are on this bandwagon. And I think largely people use the excuse that they need to topple the Assad regime because he is a threat to Israel. Please understand, if a party, if a movement comes into power in Syria that is sympathetic to or even supported by Al-Qaeda, do you really think that that power will be sympathetic to Israel? Give me a break. The problem is when you have these two opposing forces who are against one another, you have to remember they do have a common enemy, which probably is the West and Israel. So you can't pick which side is going to be the one that is least damaging to the things that we hold sacred, because they both are against everything that we hold sacred. Come on. I'm going to defer to a controversial congressman from Texas on this one.
This is, I think, sort of like what Clinton did in 1998 to get people to look at something other than the Lewinsky affair. There's a lot of scandal going on in this country, and it benefits the president to get people's mind off. Nothing like a scare tactic on foreign policy to get away from these scandals. So this is, I think, really a lot what's happening. Besides, this whole idea, if you think about it, why would President Assad, who's winning the war, use poison gas to kill 100 people, knowing full well what would happen if people thought he was using poison gas? There's no way. The man is not an idiot, and now the assumption is, yes, this is the case. But here, over 100,000 have been killed, but the only thing that counts are these 100. You know, it's sort of like wondering why people aren't concerned about 100 or 200 or 300 killed on a regular basis from a drone missile. I mean, there's some in the Senate right now. There's the neocons in the Senate who are just shouting about why we should do a lot more and don't have incrementalism. Go in there with full force. Well, I'll tell you what, the American people don't want it. We can't afford it. It's bad policy. It's not going to help Israel, and it's not going to help the rebels, because the rebels, we don't even know who they are, and if they truly are helped, it's probably going to help the Al-Qaeda. The weapons we send over there will probably end up in the hands of the Al-Qaeda and will be used against the American people. So it's time for the American people to wake up and let their members of Congress and their senators know, stop it. Why should you just sit back, let the president do these things and declare? They used to pretend, well, we don't need the congressional approval. We'll get it from the UN and get it from NATO. Well, in this case, he just does it. And nobody says anything, and the money will be there. But I tell you what, having been in Washington a long time, and the people that are there, except for a few, they're not going to say much. They're just going to go along with it. So it's going to take the American people to wake up and say, enough is enough. We're broke. We don't want this. No wonder we're in a constant recession, and no wonder that we are under constant threat by Americans being killed by the Al-Qaeda.
That, of course, was Texas Congressman Ron Paul, and I call him controversial because he truly is. I mean, even in circles where you find staunch constitutionalists and freedom-loving Americans, there's debate as to whether or not Ron Paul is genuine or if he is working for the man and has some sort of secret agenda. Sometimes conspiracy theorists, I am unashamedly probably one of them. I think that they get a little bit too excited sometimes, and they start putting labels on people that don't really deserve them. And I think that Ron Paul is one of those people that isn't really deserving of a lot of the criticism that he's gotten. He's certainly not a saint by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm sure that he, like every other politician, has skeletons in his closet. But I do say, I've seen the man in person, and I do have a lot of respect for him. I think that he's contributed greatly to a dialogue that's happening in America right now that really wasn't happening in mainstream circles prior to his emergence on the scene in the high-profile way that it had been over the past few years or number of years. I think that without Ron Paul, you wouldn't have a generation of young people now who are talking about the Federal Reserve and how it is not a federal entity, but it's actually a private bank that's given a tremendous power over the national currency and the gold standard. Without Ron Paul, you wouldn't have people talking about terms like fiat currency. and things of this nature. So I really do actually think that we owe Ron Paul quite a debt of gratitude for bringing up certain topics that were not part of the national dialogue previous to his rise to popularity, so to speak. But anyway, I really appreciate what he had to say about Syria, and I'm in full agreement with his assessment. So let's move on to another topic here, and I'm only going to just poke at this topic a little bit because it's really talk about controversial. This is another area. Perhaps if I had sat down and really kind of worked out a little script for myself, I would have avoided some of these topics that are maybe putting me in hot water with a few people. But what fun is that, right? So I just want to just pick at this little scab a little bit. One thing that I've been hearing a lot over the past week or so has been about the coming out of Russia, and about how there's this recently approved bill on banning gay sexual relations, essentially. And there's a lot more nuance to it, but that's kind of the headline. And first of all, what I'm about to say has nothing to do with whether or not it is a sin to be gay or what the gay lifestyle entails. That's really not at all what I'm touching on right now. I think everybody pretty much has their stance on that, and I'm not commenting on that for this discussion, because what I'm going to say is that point is kind of moot when it comes to some of the crap that I have been seeing coming through my Facebook feed and Twitter and even into my email and from friends, and they're commenting on this bill. And largely I've been seeing people saying things like, oh, Putin for president 2013 or 16, and the stupidest one I've been seeing is people saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to move to Russia now. First of all, it shows a complete lack of understanding of what this bill actually says and what the bills preceding it actually says. Listen, the reality of this bill and the bills that came before it and the bills that will likely come after it, the reality of what it actually is about is minorities. Essentially non-mainstream Russian minorities. And it's specifically, and then of course even those who admit that it says that say, oh, that's great, because I can't stand illegal immigrants, so, Russia really has their you-know-what together. Dumb. And I'll tell you why. Because the actual language of the bill speaks to non-traditional sex relations. It's painted it in a very, very broad brush. When we hear non-traditional sex relations, we probably think of things like homosexual sex, right? But can you imagine for a moment how... Let's talk about Russia. Now, Russia is very different than the United States. We are a melting pot. We are comprised of people of all different kinds of nationalities. And there isn't one standard where you would say, I am of the American ethnicity. In Russia, it's different. There is the Russian traditional ethnicity. There is that sort of indigenous Russian people. Okay? So when they talk about preserving their national identity, they're speaking very specifically of that Russian ethnic standard. So when they talk about the banning of non-traditional sex relations, they are not just identifying this as homosexuality, although that is how it is primarily being presented in the mainstream news, because it is a little bit more palatable amongst certain groups. There, of course, are, as I said, those who strongly support this stance, but non-traditional sex relations, according to those like Putin, who are very nationalistic, could also include the banning of marriage between an indigenous Russian person and, say, an African American or an African Russian, or even just a Westerner, or even just an American. These are very, very troubling things to consider. And so I find it disturbing that folks who out of one side of their mouth talk about how they see America becoming this fascist state, and they see America becoming this socialist entity, and they scream and cry against the way America is becoming this tyrannical dictatorship, and then out of the other side of their mouth they hear this convoluted thing coming out of Putin's mouth, and they are ready to just jump on board and support a proven tyrant. I don't understand it. I simply do not understand it. In Russia, they have these extremist laws where it outlaws extremism. And on the outset, people say, oh, well, this is obviously to curb problems with, Al-Qaeda and Muslim extremism and violence and this type of thing. Not so. Okay? This law has already been used to marginalize religious minorities. There's Jehovah's Witnesses, for example. And once again, I am not arguing whether of the veracity of the Jehovah's Witness faith. I'm not talking about that. I'm using this as an example to show how dangerous this kind of rationalization is, because we can see people calling for things like this in the United States. The folks who are Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia are being persecuted to this day. This article that came out in 2012 talks about how there's an uncanny parallel between cases against Jehovah's Witnesses now and the types of things that were happening in Soviet times in the 60s and 70s and 80s, right down to the word extremism. So Vladimir Putin, we all know, and it is never made a secret, that he pines for the old Soviet system. That were he to have his way, we would see the glory days of the USSR rekindled. And he, the days of the thugs at the KGB and the like. I mean, these are the things that he wants to see reinstated. And you have the audacity to make a comment about how you want to move to Russia. I say, by all means, go. Go to Russia, enjoy yourself. Where Vladimir Putin, and people say, oh, well, he's sympathetic to Christians because he supports the Russian Orthodox Church. The thing is, that is the only religion he supports. He supports a state religion, specific, not Christianity, but specific to the Russian Orthodox Church. And he works in lockstep with the leaders of the Russian Orthodox Church. And even one of the chaplains or priests or whatever of the Russian Orthodox Church tried to defend this stance. But then on the other hand, he comes forward and says that the Jehovah's Witnesses should be persecuted because, quote, sometimes they use towards us very impolite phrases which I can easily call extremist. So that's the kind of state that you would like to live in. That's the kind of state you would like to support, where you can be labeled as an extremist because you use, quote, impolite phrases against the state religion. And make no mistake, the Russian Orthodox Church is being presented as the state religion, the state-run religion. If you want to be a Jehovah's Witness, you will be persecuted. If you want to be an Assemblies of God member, you will be persecuted. You're considered a minority and an extremist because you disagree, and your words against the Russian Orthodox Church are impolite, and that makes you an extremist. So by all means, if that is what you support, my goodness, just get on the next flight to Russia and see how you're treated. Because guess what, my friend? As a Westerner, as one from the United States of America, the moment you set foot in Russia, you yourself will become one of these minorities that they are so adamantly trying to pass laws against. So be careful what you wish for. Those of you who say, I want to move to Russia because I support these things that Vladimir Putin is putting into place, you are the same people who are so adamantly against the USA Patriot Act. But it's the same kind of language. Listen, when you say, I can't believe that the Patriot Act labels Christians and anti-abortionists and constitutionalists as extremists. What on earth? It's the law of the land in Russia too. So by all means go support this tyrannical socialist dictatorship because they don't like gay people. By all means have at it. Because the fact of the matter is, whether or not you are in agreement with a person's lifestyle, the choices that they make and the sins they may be committing, what kind of a precedent are you setting when you want to make these types of acts illegal and you want to make the law of the land you want to set this precedent that the federal government has the right to intrude into your private life? Once again, we find ourselves back at this crossroads where we have to make a decision whether or not we support the government determining what is sacred to us as individuals. It is a tricky subject, I understand and I recognize that, but we have to be willing to say that in a political sense, we want to be free to make our own choices as Christians or as conservatives, however you self-identify. You want to be able to be free to exercise the right to be what you are and to express what you are and who you are fundamentally. And if you support a state that is willing and able to outlaw your ability to do so because it doesn't fall under the determination that they have made as to what is acceptable, then you yourself could easily find yourself being considered unacceptable on a legal basis. I don't know if I've really expressed that as succinctly as I had hoped, but the bottom line is that I understand the frustration that a lot of people have about the decline of the moral standard in our country and in the world at large. I understand the frustration, and I understand the way your heart can just break to see society degrading all around you. But you just have to be so careful what you wish for. Because if you are of the inclination that the federal government oversteps, and if you are of the belief that the federal government is too big and it's too overreaching, then you can't have that sort of belief system or philosophy, but then have it end when the overreaching massive federal government supports the one thing that's important to you. So I hate big government except in this one instance. You can't do that because it's all about setting precedent. And it's all about setting a trend. And if you set the trend that you're going to make one specific type of behavior illegal, then be ready, because the next thing to become illegal might be something that you hold very dear. And that's really all I have to say about that. So, with all of that said, I guess there's just one more thing that I kind of want to touch on, and it's a 180. It's a 180 switcheroo shebang from what we've been discussing thus far, and it's just jumping right out of the geopolitical stuff, which is important. Yes, it's important to be aware of it, and it's important to keep your eye on it and this type of thing, but it's also really crucial not to lose sight of what is the most important thing, which is not really the matters of this world, right? I mean, if you are a believer like I am, you believe we are not of this world, and this world is fallen and it's corrupt. And I think maybe part of the reason that we get so caught up in all of this political theater is because we recognize that this isn't where we belong. We're not from here, and we long to go to that place where none of this is even a factor anymore, right? And so before I get into my last little section, I do want to just say a couple of quick little things. You know, going forward with these shows, they'll probably be about 2 hours long. I don't know how long this one's going to be, because I haven't been paying attention. But if it's short of 2 hours, I will just stop. And if it's over 2 hours, maybe I'll try to clip it or cut it somewhere, or maybe not. But I do want to thank everyone who has listened up till this point, even though I really did a lot of ranting and raving. And I certainly hope that everyone who listens knows that this is all just my opinion. I'm not trying to present any of this as the be-all and end-all of how you should interpret the things that are going on. And I really hope that if people hear me say something that is completely incorrect, that you feel free to tell me so, maybe nicely and politely, and that is how I will reply to you. But yeah, I mean, I am absolutely open to being corrected, and I'm open to being engaging in a dialogue with folks. And what I'll do is I'll just open up the comment section of the show notes where this show is posted, and just invite anyone who has anything to contribute to do so there, either via Facebook. There's a section for Facebook comments, or below it where you can just comment directly on the page. And I will jump into that conversation. I won't just let you all hash it out yourselves. I mean, I'll get involved too. But, so thanks for listening up till this point, and it's been a lot to trudge through. All my people out there in the dark, still out there in the dark. And that little moment of nerdiness was me quoting Norma Desmond from the musical Sunset Boulevard, because she refers to her audience as the people in the dark, obviously because they can see her, but she cannot see them. Anyway, so yesterday was Father's Day, and it brings me to the point where I just want to say there's a few really special men in my life, and I want to talk about them really quickly. And one of them is my dad. And he's a really special guy, and he is very loving, and he's kind of like that strong, silent type, and almost the kind where people would maybe even be a little afraid of him if they didn't know him, because he comes off as kind of gruff and tough and whatever, and he's a really wonderful man, and he's not a perfect man, and we did not have a perfect upbringing, but we certainly never wanted for anything. We were kind of poor, and we didn't have lots of fancy stuff, and we didn't have a big fancy house. We always lived in small little apartments and whatever, but we didn't know really that we were poor, because we were provided for. My father was a great provider, and he still is, actually, And he's been having some health problems for the past year or so, and they've kind of confounded the medical the doctors he's been working with and the rest of us, family, and we would just welcome your prayers that he could have some peace of mind and in his body and in his heart, because he's kind of had a rough go of it. So, Daddy, I really love you. I want to thank you for everything that you've done and continue to do, and I can't wait to see you next month. And then the other person that I want to talk about is my grandfather, who almost exactly 4 years ago today passed away. And those of you who have heard me tell a little bit of my story know that my grandfather was a reverend. He was a preacher, and he was a man of God, and he was a good man, and I always looked up to him so much, and he was such a special part of my life, even during those times when I was completely rebelling against everything he said. I obviously, much of what he said found a place in my heart, and it kind of nestled in there, and he never was mean. He was never he was just always so compassionate and loving, and had so much faith in me, and loved me so unconditionally. And I the other day I was thinking about some conversations I had when I was younger with him, and one just sprung into my mind, and I hadn't thought about it in many years, and I was quite young at the time. And when I was younger, for whatever reason, I was considered some sort of a academic prodigy, I guess you could say. And due to test scores and grades and stuff like that, which are meaningless, by the way. But at the time, of course, seeing all of that, a lot of opinionated people in my life had lots of ideas of where I should go and what I should do with my life. And of course, I probably disappointed each and every last one of them. But I recall a very specific conversation in my grandparents' home. And a lot of family was gathered there, and everyone was talking about me as though I wasn't even there. And they were talking about, what I should do with my life. And some people thought that because I was really actively involved in debate and student congress and, speech and all of that kind of stuff, that I should obviously pursue law and become a lawyer or a judge or even a politician, God forbid. And and then other people thought, because of different personality traits that I had, that I should go into medicine. And still others, it was always like, everybody was talking about these big highfalutin type career choices that I should make, none of which really appealed to me at all. And while everyone was having this discussion, my grandfather was just sitting there in his rocking chair, and he was looking at me. And when there was a lull in the conversation, he said, I think that you're going to preach the gospel. And I had kind of forgotten about that up until very recently, that he had said that. And of course, at the time, I didn't really make much of it, other than I thought it was maybe just wishful thinking on his part. But in honor of that man and that prediction that he made so many years ago, I want to share a little something with you. And it is the good news. And the good news is this. And let me stop. There are some of you in the audience right now who are fans of my website, who are fans of some of the work that I do, and you're listening to this right now, and maybe you've even been saying right on all throughout this, and then you notice the direction I'm headed right now, and you're about ready to turn it off. And I'm just going to ask you respectfully, please just give me a little bit of time. Just hear me out. It's not going to kill you. Just listen to what I have to say, and then do really whatever you want with it. But it would just mean the world to me if you would just hear me out for a few minutes, and then we'll wrap it up, okay? So, of course, the good news to which I am referring is, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. That's great news. So, what do you do with that? What if you don't believe in that? Or what if you believe in that, but here's what I'm trying to say. I know that there are a lot of you out there listening right now who are afraid. You're rebellious and you're afraid against this very beautiful truth about Jesus. And the reason is because you have some shame that you're dealing with. There's a roadblock because you have done things or had beliefs or philosophies throughout your life that make you think that if there is a God, maybe he is real, but what would he want with me after all that I've done, after all that I've said, after all that I've engaged in? What would he want with me? Everything that I've learned about God, the Bible, and Jesus, everything that anyone's taught me would lead me to believe that I would probably be damned to hell anyway. So why would I care? I know that feeling. I know it. And it's a very seductive feeling. It's almost like there's that little part of you that thinks that this Bible, this biblical God, and this story of Jesus might have some truth to it, but that if it is true, then you're excluded from the good things of that anyway because of the things that you've done. And I just want to share with you something really special that kind of jumped off the page at me during a little bit of my own private Bible study not too long ago. And I don't know if a lot of people have really interpreted this particular verse the way that I did, but it really spoke to my spirit, and I want to share it with you. And it's from the very beginning of the Bible, that is Genesis chapter 3 verses 8 and 9, and I'm just gonna go for it and read them to you really quick. And this is you're at least probably familiar with Adam and Eve and the first man and the first woman, and this is after they were seduced in the garden into eating from the tree, right? Okay, you kind of know that part of it. Okay, this is immediately thereafter. And it says, "They heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord God called to the man and said to him, 'Where are you?'" Okay, I'm going to stop right there. And let's think about this for a minute. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt so ashamed of yourself for how you've lived, or something that you've done, or a variety of things that you've done, or maybe a lifetime of things that you've done or said or engaged in, and you just felt so weird and awkward and ashamed about it that you would just hide yourself? Maybe you hide yourself from your family, or you hide yourself from your friends, or as in the case of Adam and Eve, you hide yourself from God himself. And maybe your rebellion isn't really about a lack of belief or a disdain for the Bible and the truths that are in the Bible, but it's more about hiding yourself in this protective hedge of rebellion because deep down somewhere you feel you're not worthy or you're not good enough. But I want you to look at that very last sentence with as much shame that Adam and Eve felt that caused them to hide, God came looking for them, and he says, where are you? Because he comes after you. He comes looking for you. He wants you. Even when you're cowering in the bushes and trying to hide your face from him, he sees you, and he's looking for you, and he wants you. There's a really great parallel here in the book of Luke, which is Luke chapter 15, where Jesus tells this parable of the lost sheep. And he says, what man among you, if he has 100 sheep and has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open pasture and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? When he's found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost. I tell you, in that same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. I think this paints such a beautiful picture of the love, compassion, grace, and mercy that the Lord has, not just for those who are already in the fold. Don't get confused. He loves you too. And he comes after you saying, come back. Where are you? Where are you? Come back. He rejoices every time someone realizes how loved they are and accepts that free gift of love and comes to him and stops hiding from him and comes back to the flock. There's nothing that you have done in your life that changes that. There's nothing that you've been involved in or believed in or adhered to in your life that can make God not want you. And believe me, there are things that I did in my life that made me think that if this God is real, he would want nothing to do with me. And yet, he found me. He came after me and said, where are you? And I was having a panic attack, and he said, be anxious for nothing. Even though part of what brought on these panic episodes were the rebellion I had toward him, he still said, be anxious for nothing. Where are you? Stop hiding from me. Come back so that we can be rejoicing in heaven that you joined the flock. It's possible that you spent a lot of your life hearing from people who were Christians who were always reminding you about how bad you are. Were always making you feel guilty and ashamed and judged and not worthy. Well, let me tell you something. They're not doing it right. Because what they're supposed to be sharing with you is the good news. You know, they don't need to make you feel ashamed. You already feel that, don't you? I mean, if you're being honest, you already feel that because, you know, the Holy Spirit, he has a few different jobs. And one of them is to be the comforter and to bring you some peace. But the other thing is to convict. And that isn't just for believers. That's for everyone. That guilt or shame that you're feeling, that's you being convicted of your sin. In fact, that guilt and that shame that you're feeling, even though you're probably outwardly saying that you are reveling in this rebellion and whatever it is that you're doing, and it's all cool, and even though that might be the outward face of how you present it, that feeling that you have, that sort of like, even if it's just this sort of nagging at the back of your brain, or this little twinge in your gut that is telling you that you're not on the right path, that in and of itself is the evidence you're looking for that God exists. Because if your philosophy says that what you're doing is justified, but your heart says that it's kind of really wrong, what explanation is there other than the fact that you are being convicted to the fact that these things that you're doing aren't the path that you're supposed to be on? But the good news is that He loves you so much that He sent His Son. And this is really interesting. He sent His Son to die in your place. In other words, none of us, even those people who make you feel so guilty and judged and ashamed of the way that you behave, even they aren't actually good enough to go to heaven without the grace of Jesus. That's interesting, isn't it? That none of us, I mean, all of us are sinners. None of us are good enough. And even the people who are major humanitarians and who are missionaries and do these wonderful things, you know, really, as beautiful as all of that is, all of the things that you do are meaningless without grace. Without the fact that He is there to take your place and to make that sacrifice that you cannot make. And that is a loving God. That is a merciful God. And that is a God unlike any of the gods that you might have researched or looked into, whether it was Buddhism or Hinduism or some other sort of New Age philosophy. The one true God offers you something that none of these other belief systems provide, which is a God who will wash away your sins freely. Freely. You can't do anything to get it. I mean, if you're a Buddhist, you have to go through the 7 steps of enlightenment to achieve nirvana, and they're hard and they're almost impossible to attain. And if you're, you know, a Hindu, you're just going to get stuck on this circle of life and just keep going around and around and reincarnating, and you know, I mean, that's what they believe in. And you know, and when it comes to the God of the Bible, the God that I believe in, the God that I believe is the one true God, the thing that sets Him apart is that He freely gives you this grace and this mercy that all you have to do is accept Him and believe in Him, and He gives you the free gift of salvation that you don't have to strive for, that you don't have to be good enough for. Because while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Isn't that something? I mean, just think about it. I mean, even if in your head you're kind of going blah 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 blah, whatever, just let it marinate. Just let that cruise around in your brain a little bit. And the reason I present it the way I do is because I was there, and these are the kind of things that I wish someone would have said to me, because I probably would have spent a lot less time striving and a little bit more time living. So hopefully somebody out there hears this and is going to give it a chance. And if you have questions, I would welcome you to just, send me an email. If you go to my website, there's the contact thing in the navigation bar. It just says contact, and it's like a little form you can fill out that'll come directly to my email, and I will answer any question you might have, and talk these things through with you if you want. Or, I will be happy to direct you to someone who's maybe more knowledgeable than me, because I'm not a scholar, I'm not a theologian, I'm not probably as brushed up on scripture as I should be. And I'm working on it, by the way. But I'm not probably to the level that that some other people are. But all I can really do is talk to you about the things that I know that I know that I know. And what I know that I know, that I really, really know, is that if you draw nearer to God, He will draw nearer to you. Pretty much that simple. And He loves you. And I love you too. Okay, well, what have we learned today, boys and girls? I think we've learned a couple of things. One of the things we definitely have taken away from this is that it takes Natalina an inordinate amount of time to finish even the smallest of tasks. And although this podcast has by no means been a small task, for some people, they probably could bang something like this out in a day, and I'm not one of them. I started working on the setup for it last week, and then I did the primary audio recording on Monday with the, really strong intent of getting it out by Tuesday, and now it is Thursday, and God willing, I will post it today. I hope all of the news topics that I discussed aren't completely out of date by this point, but something tells me that they are not. I want to give a quick shout out to a couple of people. One is my business partner, Jean, and we've been working together for about 5 years now, and we just came together with sort of a mutual love for writing and wanting to give platforms to other writers out there. And as a result, we've spent the last several years not just honing our own skills, but also helping a few other people get websites set up where they can write and express themselves. And without him, I wouldn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to my own site, because he's the kind of technical guy. He knows all of the coding and the background database stuff, and that stuff to me I've been learning over the years, and I've gotten a lot more knowledgeable, but for the most part I know diddly squat about it, and he really has been a saving grace in a lot of ways. And so thank you, Jean. And another person I want to thank, of course, is my friend James, who I've known for many years. And he was so supportive of me starting up a podcast that just out of the blue, one day he invited me over. And here I come to find out that he bought me this really fancy little microphone that I've been using. And gosh, I wouldn't have known what to get, and I probably couldn't have afforded it. So it was a really nice surprise. It was really sweet and humbling to know that somebody was that interested in seeing me, put out the best product that I possibly could. And, he actually went to school to study production and that kind of thing. And so it's nice to have a friend like that. He's going to be taking a look at some of my things that I record and mastering them and doing different fancy backgroundy type things to them that I don't understand. And so I really thank him for being such a good friend, and thank my husband, of course, for putting up with all of my crap and having me shut myself into this back office to do recording, and that means that he has to deal with the cat, who does not like it, by the way, when I close doors, especially when he's on the other side of said door. He gets a little afraid that maybe he's never going to see me again. And as a result, he cries and cries, and the husband has to deal with that. So, amongst many other things, that is one way that my husband is the man of the year. And then finally, I just want to point out a couple of things. If you would be so kind as to go to my website and just maybe leave a comment or two if you listened all the way to the end here about what you thought about the show, and maybe you have some guest suggestions you could shoot my way. That'd be really great. Any advice or words of encouragement would be appreciated, or insults are less appreciated but also welcome. With everything I always say, if you approach me with kindness, even if it is something of a critique, then I will respond to you in the same way. So, even if you approach me in kind of a mean way, I'll probably still come back to you with kindness. That's just how I roll. So, other than that, I would invite you to take a look at some of the most recent content on my site. I haven't posted a whole lot in the past week or so, and I'll tell you why, because I've been working on this. So going forward, I'm hoping that I will be a lot more attentive to getting my writing out there, because as much as I'm probably going to love doing this podcast thing, writing is my first passion, and so I need to really get back on that and give the people what they want, right? And then while you're at my site, as icky of a thing as it is to talk about, I mean, I do have expenses. I have a server that I have to pay for and all of these other things. So if you feel like you want to contribute to the site or to the show, I do have a donate button on my site. And, one thing I did do, because obviously sometimes it is kind of a weird thing to ask people, hey, you want to give me some money? One of my many, many talents that you may not be aware of is that I also am a jewelry maker, and I have a website for my jewelry. It's called extraordinaryboutique.com, and I keep that extraordinary thing in the family. And then there's a link to it in the navigation bar on my website, and then if you scroll all the way down to my website, you'll also see a link to my Etsy page. And in the coming days, I'll be adding a lot more inventory to that. That simply hasn't been I haven't had time to post yet. Though, if you want to help me out, but you want to get a little something in return, other than my gratitude, it really would be awesome if you found a piece of jewelry that you wanted to pick up and purchase. That would be super cool. But much more than that, I would say, I really would love for you to keep me in your prayers, that I'm able to keep up with this, and that I'm able to kind of balance it with my other things, my writing and that type of thing, and to maybe with some of the things that I discuss or talk about, touch a few people who maybe wouldn't have been super inclined to listen to the types of things that I discuss. And I know I got a little bit maybe like preachy towards the end of this particular episode, but I just felt moved to do so. Probably won't be doing a whole lot of that, but you know what? If the Spirit moves you, you just go with it. You don't argue. And that's what I will always promise you. So I really appreciate you listening in, and I hope that you tune in with the next episode, which I'm hoping to get out by the end of this week. You think I can do it? I mean, not tomorrow, but like Sunday. I think I can do it. I have faith. Do you? You are listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina. You are the extraordinary audience, and I am your extraordinary host, Ms. Natalina. Thank you, millions and billions, for listening.
You've been listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina. For the latest headlines and program schedule, please visit extraordinaryintelligence.com.